All right. Good morning, Doug. I read an article that you published in International Man recently about the end of the nation state, and it's an incredible article. I'll link to it in the description. I encourage everyone to go get it, go read it, the whole thing for themselves, and also just sign up for the free newsletter at International Man as well. But I thought it was definitely worth going through this, and because your thinking on this is, we talked about some of these issues, but it's very concisely stated in this essay. So can you just kind of walk us through the idea here?
Okay, this is big picture stuff, which is I find a lot of fun. And basically, I'm tracing the history of civilization and government and the nation state from day one. Let's look at it this way. Day one was for human beings was 200 or 300,000 years ago when modern man first evolved. In other words, people that look and act and talk and think probably just like us. That's about when it happened, anthropologists think. From that time forward, we organized ourselves in tribes. That was the largest type of a division, and there were clans that were smaller, which was just your really local family. But it's interesting. People, we're social animals. We need each other to survive. Specialization, division of labor. So that's the way it is. I mean, there are very few lone wolves out there in the primeval forest. We actually need each other. All right, the tribe as a way of organizing. You shared a lot of genetics with these people. You shared a language with these people. You shared a culture with them. You got together as often as possible. Not too often, because in primitive times, pre-agricultural times, you had to spread out because you were hunting and gathering, okay? All right, tribes. So somebody would run a tribe. It would be a chief, but tribes were democratic. The guy that was best at whatever it is would do whatever it was, including, offer counsel or help make decisions and so forth. And if you got a bad actor, somebody that might have been bigger and stronger than everybody else and bad tempered and tried to beat them all up, well, as I point out in the article, people like that generally wind up dead one morning in a pool of their own blood.
Get fragged,
So
so to speak, right?
he gets fragged, exactly. So tribes in a primeval environment, uh, they work, they're democratic. So what happens over time, because people are a lot like the squirrels we hunt, we tend to accumulate capital. We learn more intellectual capital and pass it on to the next generation. If we don't have writing, there's a limit to how much you can pass on. And you try to put together primitive capital in the way of skins and whatever things you make out of wood and stone. But the big thing is that about 12,000 years ago, this was all the Ice Age. Man involved during the Ice Age, which lasted a couple 100,000 years. And of course, there have been many ice ages throughout the Pleistocene period. But when the last ice age ended 10 to 12,000 years ago, a lot more of the Earth's surface became habitable. And it became possible at that point to grow things. And we had the agricultural revolution all over the world, really. People stopped hunting and gathering so much, and they started growing things because it's a softer, easier life. And they, started moving into villages and then cities. And what happened in Sumer 5,000 years ago or so, the construction of the first cities. Okay, agricultural revolution. And the way people organized themselves then was they found that a king or a prince or a pharaoh uh, of some type in a city. So this was the era of kingdoms, and it had to do with the means of production. Incidentally, all this has to do with the means of production. This is this was one of Karl Marx's big thoughts, that the means of production are what determine everything. And Karl Marx is wrong about most things. Certainly his moral sentiments are all wrong. But I think it's a brilliant observation that's borne out by everything that I can see. The means of production tends to orient the way society is structured. So in tribal times, well, it was very democratic, actually. And then as we moved into agricultural times, the means of production where you have to move the river and lay out the big fields and this type of thing, that was once again change in the means of production, change in the way society ordered. Then the next big change was, let's say in the 1600s, when the Industrial Revolution, proto, got underway. I mean, the Industrial Revolution really didn't start until the 17th, but it was already starting, let's say in the 1600s, even before then. And at that point, the nation state arose, this idea of mass democracy and so forth. There were still princes and that, but you know, the average guy, instead of just being treated like a robot, actually could have a say more and more and more. So it's spelled out better in the article. I'm just trying to broad brush this thing. The point that I'm trying to make here is that I think, you know, that evil fool, Klaus Schwab, and all the people like him in the World Economic Forum, they may be right. Again, just like Marx was kind of right. And we may be in for a great reset of some kind, that it's not going to, just like it didn't go the way Karl Marx thought, or he thought would naturally lead to communism. I don't think it's going to go the way Klaus thinks it's going to go either. And as the world reorients itself, and I think it's doing so now, I'd like to think that it will make it more possible for the individual to rise as opposed to cement the collective in place, which is what Klaus thinks. So the nation state was a bad idea. It suited the times, but lasted for about 500 years, had a pretty good run. But now we're going to see what comes next. And I will put forward the proposition, which I've said a number of times in our conversations here. I think it's going to evolve into what Neil Stephenson called files, where people will still be social and get together and do all the things they've always done since pre-agricultural times, but they're going to orient themselves according to what's important for them, whether that's their politics or their economics or their family or their hobbies or their occupations, a thousand different things. So nation states are going to be replaced by files. So that's my basic contribution to big picture thinking.
Well, and the way you break it down is very interesting because, you know, you like, for instance, within the Industrial Revolution, you talk about that, you know, while it did result in the creation of these nation states, you know, and the strengthening of them, but it also empowered the common man with more personal freedom and also the ability to acquire capital, you know, and kind of improve their own lives within, you know, in the Industrial Revolution. And what are the factors that drove that, the positive parts? While the nation state was created through the Industrial Revolution or strengthened through the Industrial Revolution, the individual got some benefits, substantial benefits out of that. What were the factors that led to the individual participation in that success?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with technology, quite frankly. And that's another interesting sub-subject that relates to all this. It's that technology always seems to devolve to the elite, the people on top first. They get access to it first. An example of that is gunpowder. That peasant didn't get gunpowder first. It was the rulers that got gunpowder. But pretty soon, the technology devolved so everybody could get gunpowder. And at that point, the armored knight could be taken down, by a peasant with a gun. Something was totally impossible before because gunpowder devolved. And of course, the printing press, another example of that. Initially, it was controlled just by the powers that be. You don't want the hoi polloi to get all this information. Then they might start thinking things that would overthrow the order, the existing order. But eventually, it democratized. And I'm not a fan of democracy as a way to politically organize, but on the other hand, I'm all for the common man. So it's a little bit of a paradox, at least on the surface. So the printing press also liberated the common man. Technology is always the friend of the common man in the long run. Computers, another example. When computers first developed seriously, let's say in the 1950s, only a large corporation or a government could afford a giant and extremely expensive computer.
Mhm.
But eventually, they got cheaper and faster and more numerous. And now the average guy can have one. And the state always uses these things to suppress the hoi polloi, always, with all these three examples I've given. But eventually the cat gets out of the bag. And, hackers now can, get into the Pentagon's computers and they will, and God knows what will happen.
Mm.
So technology, I think, is a major driver of this liberating the individual and allowing the individual. And the other thing is the development of capitalism, which it was always buying and selling in the free market. That was always there. But the thing is that the Industrial Revolution, especially, made it possible for the average guy, as long as he produced more than he consumed, he could set aside the difference and put it in the form of specie, gold or silver, to save it and build his own wealth up. And that's liberating for the individual too. So another example, because money is just a technology, uh, real money.
One of the this I wonder how much this article was influenced by is it Bozun? Is that the author's name that does
Barzun,
Onto Decadence?
Dr. Jacques Barzun. That's a fantastic book. Is it Decadence and Decline? Is that book?
From Dawn to Decadence.
Dawn to Decadence, yes. No, I only read that book in the last year, and it's a marvelous book. When we hopefully get Gary North on, we can talk to him about it. Gary has probably read more books than anybody I've ever met that I know of. And he's certainly written more books than anybody that I know of. I mean, that is a definite thing.
But one of the things that seems a theme in here is like, though, the
Gary will mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what I was thinking of is that you're talking about like it just reminded me, one of the themes in that book was the emancipation of the individual. All of these changes and things, were sort of driven by an effort for emancipation and a freedom of the individual. And it seems like, certainly, by having more time in the agricultural revolution and, by not being so bound to the tribe necessarily, so limited by it, I guess. And then the industrial revolution, gives you the way to create your own capital, to save capital, and to grow, to free yourself from other burdens. How does that, I guess, that theme kind of continue into what you see coming next with the failure of the nation state, with these essentially collapsing in on themselves?
Well, it'll be a wonderful thing. Everybody right now at least if they're libertarian oriented or have basically culturally conservative values, is very afraid of what's going on now, where the UN is trying to expand and take over everything, and all these various other organizations are trying to expand. The WHO is trying to take over the world's medical system. There's dozens of these organizations, but actually, they may be trying to do that, but these people are dinosaurs, and it's going to be tumultuous uh, for us little mammals when the dinosaurs are up there thrashing around. I think they're in their death throes, frankly. Uh, but it'll work out well for us in the end, because talking about technology again, uh, I really think that Ray Kurzweil is onto something when he talks about the singularity, which is he expects it to pop into existence generation from now, 20 to 30 years from now. And at that point, everything from robotics to artificial intelligence to space travel, material science, 3D printing, and the big one is nanotechnology, the creation of machines on a molecular and submolecular level, and supercomputers on a submolecular level. And at that point, you get, raw materials are becomes academic, because nanomachines guided by supercomputers that are programmed can take anything apart into its
Subatomic parts, right?
yeah, exactly, down to its component elements, and reassemble it according to another program into whatever you'd like. It's like magic. It's like pixie dust is what that's going to be. I mean, that's in my opinion, that's the big thing, much more than the other things I just mentioned. So this evolution is going to continue, and that's going to, totally liberate individuals when they get a hold of that. Now, of course, there's dangers involved with these
Right.
things. There's dangers involved with there were dangers involved with gunpowder, obviously. But it was a
Well,
good thing.
I think what a lot of people are worried about is that these technologies, you know, are they can see how they're maybe an attempt to use those things against us now. Like this. There's a, um, you know, I guess Ray Kurzweil calls it the singularity, but when you hear the globalists talk about it, it's more like transhumanism stuff, and it's almost like an effort to, it gets tied to this idea of eugenics and other things. Like that's the way the conspiracy is all in that direction. But I guess what you're saying is like a lot of technologies, like, DARPA's creation of the internet, it was designed. I mean, we were reading just recently in Raven Rock, about the first emails that were sent, designed to be from these bunkers, in the worst case scenario, from one to another. And now, you and I have exchanged, I don't know, half a dozen emails today already. I mean, it's just like, it's such and this technology gets out there everywhere. It can be a great benefit.
Yeah, the cat always gets out of the bag. And the fact that the bad guys out there, the deep state and the globalists and the rest of these guys that are on top, are trying to control things more tightly, which they definitely are in every way possible. The fact that they're trying to do that really won't make any difference, because technology has a life of its own, and it's going to devolve to the average man, and it's going to be very liberating. The average guy is going to become on. Look, the individual guy could wind up being as hard to control as Iron Man, if you would, something like that. I mean, I really believe that the future is not only going to be stranger than we imagine, but stranger than we can imagine, just because of this evolution of technology. So, yeah, I'm really worried about what the deep state guys and the globalists and all the rest of these people that are trying to control the world are doing now. It can be dangerous and inconvenient, but the same thing is true with, well, gunpowder. They had it to begin with and used it to keep people more under control, but then you know, things evolve, and it's a story with a happy ending. I'd like to, I'd like to believe that. I'd like to shed my gloom and doom image and say, don't worry, it's all going to work out just fine.
I like that. And I think that's, the second paragraph of this article. And again, I encourage everyone to read it. I'll have a link in the description. You say, quote, now might be a good time to discuss the subject. We'll have an almost unremitting stream of bad news on multiple fronts for years to come. So it might be good to keep a hopeful prospect in mind. Sorry, I couldn't read apparently, but it is hopeful. It is a very white pilled, if you will, in terms of what the future really is. And I wonder, right now, the way that because it feels like we're maybe in the middle of this shift, or with it, maybe not in the middle. We might be only in the beginning of this shift right now. But you talk about the need that people have for each other in these tribes as social animals, and and throughout the Industrial Revolution. I mean, this is still there, and you talk about how in the future we'll associate by deeper interest, values, and things like that in these files. I wonder right now in this, it does seem like we're in this a little bit of this no man's land where humans don't have that social connection that we have had historically. And I think there is a real hunger for that. I mean, we see that within our own, within the people who follow us, Um, so, I wonder if how much of that desire to be social animals, to connect with like-minded people, is a driver of the good stuff that's to come, that we want to be more connected to people that are like us, and that urge, that desire, what kind of stuff that might drive.
Yeah, that's a good point. So right now, the internet is allowing people to identify each other in data space. So you can find out, who your real friends are everywhere in the world. And I consider my countrymen people that I share values with. I don't care if they live in China or the Congo or Brazil or in the US. And I don't necessarily consider Americans to be my friends because, somebody that just happens to be born in the US could be completely antithetical to all these things. Okay, that's fine. So now we can identify ourselves, but because we're social animals, we like to get together in Meatspace,
Yeah.
MEAT and MEET, both. And I think that's just naturally going to happen
Hmm.
because you like to be physically around people that you. Of course, maybe as a in between on the way, uh, with as computers advance at the pace they are, it's maybe everybody's going to have a haptic suit for a while. So you put on this suit, and it'll like put you, you know,
Yeah. The VR, like Ready Player One or something.
yeah, exactly, where everything feels and smells and sounds, everything. It's like you can put yourself in a dream world with the haptic suit. And I'm sure these things are being developed and are on the on the way now as a intermediary.
Yeah, I think so. And that actually, I'll have to. Speaking of meeting up in Meatspace, we'll be at Freedom Fest next week, where there'll be lots of like-minded folks there. I think that's next week, isn't it?
Yeah,
Um,
it's the 20th through the 25th in Rapid City.
right. So
So if
that'll be
anybody's thinking about taking a road trip in between, around then, that's a good place to go.
absolutely.
It's not far from Deadwood, which I've never been to, and I want to pay homage to Al Swearingen.
Yeah, we what are the someone mentioned in one of the comments that they started watching Deadwood because we were talking about it, and I said, well, my reply to his comment was, if these podcasts that you and I are doing, Doug, do nothing other than introduce a handful of people to Deadwood and Al Swearingen, then I will have considered it a success.
That's right. That and the other thing I would put into the same category is have gun will travel.
Yes.
And a friend of mine, an old high school friend of mine, who's also a fan, he was telling me about one that I hadn't seen before, where Paladin is actually at his best. he's quoting Shakespeare, he's quoting Aeschylus while it's just, I haven't seen that one. I'm going to, well, fortunately there's 5 years of those too, only 3 seasons of Deadwood. So,
Well, and each season has tons of episodes. It's not like a modern television series, where, I mean, this, like, a season can have, I don't know, it's more than a dozen episodes, or about a dozen episodes.
yeah, I think they often have 20 or 25. And of course, they're only a half hour,
Yeah.
actually less than a half hour because there's time for commercials. So actually, it's like a 25-minute perhaps drama. So,
And I think they're on YouTube now, so people should look that up. Have Gun Will Travel.
They are. You can go on YouTube and put in Have Gun Will Travel, and there they will be.
Yeah, so I encourage people definitely to go watch those. And
you think they'll be deplatformed though, because they're so ideologically sound? I mean, they might Have Gun Will Travel, might, just the name might put ideas in people's heads. They might be deplatformed. Maybe I should get a set on CDs.
I did buy all 5 seasons on DVD, so I've got them all.
Yeah,
good. So I'll create a backup somewhere just in case the algorithm takes them down because of the use of the word gun. But I don't think anyone on the woke side will begin to watch them. I mean, first of all, they're those old timey black and white shows. I mean, who of the woke would watch those?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. There's no special effects to appeal to teenage boys. Oh. Although I was a teenage boy and it really appealed to me. And
well, my son enjoys them. We watch when we're in the RV. It's one of the things you typically do in the evening is put in. So we got a DVD player in there. We'll put in a couple episodes of Have Gun Will Travel, and he enjoys them. So they could be good. So okay, well, I guess the big thing from this is that you believe this is the basis of why you are a long-term optimist, and you talk about that a lot. But I think we end up focusing on the short-term disasters kind of underway. But this,
and it's understandable because we live in the here and now and the short term, and we may not be alive for the long term. Although if you can stay alive another 20 years, you might be able to live for hundreds of years. Another magical thing that's likely to come out of all of this. So I take my vitamins every day.
Playing the long game. All right. Well, we'll leave it there then. And on a hopeful note, but we'll encourage people to check out that article, sign up for International Man, where you can get the free newsletter with them. And then, well, I'll look up a couple of videos of Have Gun Will Travel and link to those as well, so people can check out that show.
Yeah, right. It's hard to select the best one because they're almost all so good. But
they are. I agree. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.